Well, shalom and welcome to everyone as we come into part 3 of the Josiah study of reinstating his Passover with all of these sacrifices that were offered on the Passover day. And we just welcome you, and there is some new information, so we hope you enjoy it today. Just like to welcome Kim as she helps me, Charlene, with this study on Josiah today.
Thank you. So yes, this is our third study as we're going over Yoshiyahu's 41,400 Passover sacrifices before night. And it's a dawn day study of great importance. We hope you will see that today. The purpose of this study is to now finalize if King Yoshiyahu directed Israel's Passover, Abib 14 celebration, according to the Torah. There's still more to come. So some of the questions we have for you in this part 3, is it possible for the morning to have the first position over evening? Is it possible for the evening sacrifice to have the first position over the morning sacrifice? And how about this question? Did the unscriptural solution of the Pharisees to relocate the daily morning and evening sacrifices, did that solve the same day problem? And what about these Hebrew words, Rishon and Shani? What do they have to do with Bein Ha'arbeim and the dawn day and sunset day start? A reminder for you that because this study is based on the day start, we need to be very clear on our terminology. And so we will have another short review. There will be some additional information connected to the definitions for morning. And for this study, it was necessary to use the Englishman's Concordance. So our first reminder, again, about the covenant of day season and night season found in Jeremiah 33. This covenant was given on the very first day of creation. And it says in verse 20, "Thus said Yahuwah, if you could break my covenant with the day and my covenant with the night, so that there be not day and night in their season, then my covenant could also be broken with David my servant, so that he shall not have a son to reign upon his throne, and with the Levites, the priests, my attendants." Verse 25, "Thus said Yahuwah, if my covenant is not with day and night, and if I have not appointed the laws of the heavens and earth, then I would also reject the descendants of Yaakov and David my servant."
Yes, and so the day season and the night season are very, very different, and they each have their functions, and we need to remember that. Another second important reminder, which is an imperative message of the covenant of the day season. This day season includes two other components, commonly known as twilights, and both of these twilights are important and they serve very different purposes. We're going to look at number 1, dusk twilight first. Dusk twilight is the period when the mixing of light and darkness is between the day season and the night season of the same cycle. That's the dusk twilight. It is a mixing that is between day and night. But the dawn twilight is a little bit different. It's a period of when the mixing, again, of darkness and light is now going to divide. It divides the previous night season from the new day season cycle. So they both have very different functions. Well, let's look further into two words. It's going to be twilight and morning. Let's see what we can find. Why is it important to know so much about morning? Isn't morning just morning, and that's just the way it is? We're going to look at 4 different categories of morning. They're numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4. Number 1 is morning at the first dawn light. Number 2 is morning, when the sun rises. And number 3 is morning as that forenoon. And number 4, morning ends with high noon. In English, morning can apply to several different definitions, but in Hebrew, things are different. There are different words for the variety of morning definitions that are very specific. And I would just like to note here that all light that is assigned to the sun and the stars is called or light, O-W-R. We're going to see this a little bit more further down the line. But all of the light that comes from the sun and the stars is always or light. The Hebrew number is 216. Hebrew lists 10 different words or 10 different numbers for morning, 10 of them. In Genesis 1:1, we have our very first reference to morning. I'm going to be using these Strong's numbers, so you'll have to pay attention. It's 1242. It's found in verse 5. It's Boker, and you will find that there's 214 occurrences of Boker in the Old Testament. What is the definition? Properly, the definition of Boker is dawn as the break of day, that very first light that breaks through the night. Generally, so there's properly a definition, and then generally, it's morning. That would be all the way to sunrise. But this first definition here is the one that we're looking at, because there are general terms as well. So the very first word that you'll find in the scriptures is morning as boker. It has a primitive root. It's 1239, found first time in Leviticus 13:36. It's bakar, and a lot of you would know that this is linked to oxen or something that pulls a plow. Now you're going to find 7 occurrences of bakar of 1239. If you look in the Englishman's, you will find 7 occurrences. But the surprise was that not one listing is linked to day start. They're linked to the word inquiry, and that was a puzzle for me. But the definition for bakar, again, we have properly and generally. Look what it says. Properly is to plow, and generally is to break forth, okay? But there is a question. Why are there 7 verses for bakar with the number 1239, and not one of them is linked to the dawn day start? How does that work? Well, another important note, we have to have first things first. If 1239 bakar is the primitive root of 1242 boker, could there be something to note for man's word numbers of 1240 and 1241 to bridge our understanding from a plow to the dawn day start of 1242? So between 1239 to 1242, if you look in the Strong's book, you will have these other numbers. You'll have 1240 and 1241. What's going on here with these numbers? Why? What is going on? Because remember I said, not one of the 7 scriptures that utilize 1239 bakar connect to the division of the new day with the dawn daybreak. Jeff Benner defines it on page 419 of his book. He defines bakar as seek, to look or search for something. And he has King James inquire with an E. We're going to talk about that in a bit as well. Inquire. So bakar 1239 is going to link to 7 scriptures. In Jeff Benner's Ancient Hebrew Lexicon, he has the following note which could be helpful. He says that bakar, which is 1239, is seek, to look or search for something. Remember I said he had King James Version, inquire with an E. Well, I went to look in the King James Version, And I found that it only uses inquire, never enquire. Oh, that's kind of interesting. So you will not find in the King James where the word enquire ever links to 1239. So if you're looking up a word, you'll have to look for inquire. But bakar, 1239, right here, you can see the Hebrew letters. Do compare those Hebrew letters. Let's look at a little bit of what these verses are. We'll just give a context. Leviticus 13:36, it's an inquiry of leprosy. In Leviticus 27:33, it's an inquiry into the tithe of the flock. Remember, they were just to count every 10th animal, and it didn't matter if it was good or if it had the scar or something. The 10th one was the tithe. So it's an inquiry into the tithe of the flock. In 1 Kings 16:15, we have King Ahaz here, and he's choosing to make inquiry beside his new bronze altar. And it was an idolatrous altar, by the way, and he was going to replace Solomon's altar of the temple. Definitely, this has nothing to do with the day start. Number 4, Psalms 27:4, is to inquire in Yahuwah's temple. And then number 5, in Proverbs 20:25, it says, don't make an inquiry after making a rash vow. In other words, seek and inquire before your vow is made. Don't make an inquiry afterwards. That has nothing to do with day start. And then there's 2 examples in Ezekiel 34. And they're both talking about Yahuwah is going to seek out, or he's going to inquire after his scattered sheep. He's going to inquire what has happened to his sheep. None of these verses has anything to do with day start that I could find. So is this inquiry a verb function? Inquiring about leprosy? Do you see that there's an action happening? Inquiring about the tithe of the flock? It's looking for something. If you look at all of these, it's a verb function. Somebody is doing something, and that might be a clue. I'd just like to give you a page from Jeff Benner's Ancient Hebrew Lexicon, page 37. He has a little bit here on the Hebrew language that might be helpful for some of us. He says, well, let me start at the very beginning. Each root represents an action, an object that reflects the action, and an abstract derived from the action of the object. That action is referred to as a verb, while the object and the abstract are referred to as nouns. So we have to pay attention to verb function and noun function. And he goes on to give a little example there. Well, we all should know that verbs have something to do with action. Hebrew verbs, like English verbs, describe action. Because the Hebrew language is an action-oriented language rather than descriptive, it is prolific with verbs. The verbs are way more important in the Hebrew language. When a Hebrew verb is conjugated in a sentence, it identifies a person, a number, a gender, a tense, a mood, and a voice. Now, we're just going to look at the first 3, person, number, and gender. Understanding these different aspects of a verb is essential for proper interpretation of that verb. Now, we all know that person is a noun, but the action of these verbs are going to identify something special about person, number, and gender. So person is a noun. So that verb is going to identify the subject of the verb as first person, second person like you, or third person, he or she, as a person. What about number? That's a noun. And each verb is also going to indicate the subject of the verb. Is it singular or plural? Is it we, you, or they? Those are nouns. And then the gender. Noun is a gender. Is the verb going to indicate that the subject of the verb is masculine or feminine? So those are just a few of the ways that Hebrew works. We're not the experts, but the verb is going to have a lot to say about what's happening with the noun. So we need to understand the difference between verbs and nouns. And helpful information from Jeff Benner is going to be interesting for the difference between bakar, look at these Hebrew letters, and boker. The Hebrew letters are exactly the same. It's just the vowel points that are different. You can see that. Bakar and boker. They have a little different sound because of those vowel points. Hebrew letters are exactly the same. So which of these is the verb? Which of these two is the noun? And which one is the primitive root? The primitive root is going to go back to the verb. Did man identify the primitive root correctly? That is our question today. Out of what is happening with the man-made numbers in the Strong's Concordance, did man identify the verbs correctly as the primitive roots? Are they in the right order? So the question is bakar really the primitive root? Or is it another word? Well, let's search this out. And what we're going to do is we're going to look between the numbers 1239, which is bakar. Bakar is 1239. And we're going to check it out up to 1242, which is boker. Remember 1239? It says it's the verb. It is going to be the verb, and it's got primitive root right there. It's properly to plow, or generally to break forth, to inquire, to search, and to seek out something. The word number 1240 that follows after 1239, bakar, is also a verb. It's Aramaic, though, and it means exactly the same as 1239. 1241 is the next one that is listed. Have you noticed something between the Hebrew letters? Keep an eye out, because these letters are exactly the same as bakar. See that? And these vowel points are a little bit different on this word. 1241 is also bakar, but now it's a noun. It's from 1239, which can mean beef cattle, or an animal of the ox family, or either gender as used for plowing. Collectively, it can be a herd, a bull, a bullock, etc. Lots of cattle, great cattle. So 1241 is talking about nouns, is talking about cattle. Jeff Benner on page 308, he's got 1241, and he says it's a plow. There's your noun. And he says the breaking open of the ground with a plow pulled by oxen. On page 309, he's got 1241 as cattle, and that's a noun. Strong beasts used to break the soil with plows. Question, do you see how 1239 and 1241 are connected to the plow and to the oxen? Excuse me. We have bakar and we have boker. How will the plow and the oxen relate to 1239? Well, 1242 has those same letters, and it's boker. This is now a noun. It's properly to dawn as the break of the day. Like the plow breaks the ground, generally morning, and it's early. Jeff Benner on page 309 has 1242, and he's saying this is the herdsman. There's your noun. One who works with cattle. And on page 309, he also has 1242, morning, which is a noun, the breaking of daylight. How will the herdsman and the morning relate to 1239 Bakar? Question. Will Bakar retain the primitive root? That's what we're looking for. Is Bakar going to keep this primitive root, which means properly to plow or generally to break forth? Yes, but why? That's the question. Because 1239 Bakar is the verb. And because Bakar identifies all the nouns of 1241 and 1242. Kim, can you take over, please?
I will. And so, yes, we can see, oh, where are we? Plow, cattle, herdsman are nouns, breaking of the ground. And morning as a noun, that's from the break of day to sunrise. So yes, bakar can be retained as the primitive root. Now let's take a look at the next two Hebrew words and numbers for morning. Remember, we're using Englishman's Concordance here. So in Genesis 19:15, the first reference to morning, that's H78:37, is shachar, and there's 24 occurrences. Properly, it is dawn, as the day spring, and generally, whence riseth. And you can find this word in some examples here in Genesis 19, with Lot and the family fleeing from Sodom and Gomorrah. In Genesis 32, with Jacob and wrestling with that angel, that man. Judges 19, the Levite and concubine scenario. In Nehemiah 4, with the labor, how the men were laboring with spears. And even in Jonah 4, the worm and the gourd, we find.
Yes, and I'd just like to make mention here that in every one of these scriptures, and you can look at all the rest, it's generally something, an action happening during this morning period. Shakar seems to be linked together with another action that's happening. Okay, Kim, you can just finish
Yep.
the slide for me.
And so the primitive root is H78:36, shachar. In Job 7:21, we will read that. But there are 12 occurrences: properly, dawn, and generally up early for a task. We read in Job 7:21, I sleep in the dust, and thou shalt seek me in the morning, shachar, but I shall not be.
Mhm.
And another Hebrew word number for morning, Genesis 19:2, its first reference, morning of 79:25, a primitive root, it's shakam. There's 65 occurrences. So properly, it means to incline a burden to the shoulder or early in the morning. And literally, it's to load up on the back of a man or a beast. In Genesis 19, Lot advises his angel guests to not leave at night, but to rise up early to leave, shakam. And you'll find many other examples when you trace this word to the rising up early, for example, with Abraham, Jacob, Moses, Joshua, the judges, Samuel, kings, prophets, and priests, both clean and corrupt. And then Hebrew lists one word number for morning twilight in 2 Kings 7:5. The word is neshef. First reference, morning, H5399. There are 12 occurrences with the word neshef. The second definition properly means dawning of the day, and generally the morning, twilight, neshef. 2 Kings 7:5 reads, and they rose up in the twilight to go unto the camp of the Syrians. First definition properly, a breeze as dusk, twilight in the evening. So the conclusion of this section of number 1 here, in general terms, the following 3 Hebrew word terms all define dawning and dawn and the first morning twilight as a division between the former night and the new cycle. We've looked at Boker, Shachar, Neshef. And then what about the night? We've seen stars give or light. But wait, there's more.
So let's look at number 2, section number 2,
Mhm.
where morning is also defined as sunrise. In Genesis 32:26, the first reference to the day breaketh, and it's a primitive root, it's 59:27. There's only one occurrence, it's Allah, and it properly means to ascend up, or the day breaketh. Very interesting, just one reference. In Genesis 32:31, basically in the same chapter, you'll have the first reference to the sun rose, and it's also a primitive root, 22:24. There's 18 occurrences, and it's zarak. Properly, this means to irradiate, shoot forth beams, to rise as the sun. Do you know what we're talking about? Yes, about Jacob wrestling with the angel. In Genesis 32:26 and 30-31, and he said, let me go, for the day breaketh. It's the Shakar. 78:37, this one is Shakar. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen Elohim face to face. And as he passed over Peniel, the sun rose. There's your Zarak, 22:24, arose upon him. Next, we're going to take a look at or light. And this is section number 3. All light from the sun and from the stars is defined as or 216. The morning or light includes the time frame of the sun's light from Boker to midday. You'll find this first reference to light is in Genesis 1:3. It's morning, sun, and that primitive root is 215. There's 123 occurrences. Or, what is the definition? Properly, it's a luminary, bright, clear day, morning, and sun. In Genesis 1:3, Yahuwah said, let there be light. This is or. And there was light. I want you to note that the very first day of creation did not begin with Boker, did not begin with the first mixing of light. It began with or light. It was pure light from the sun. But 216 can also refer to the break of day. When we look in Judges 16:2, and they were laying wait for Samson. They laid wait all night in the gate of the city, and they were quiet all the night, saying, in the morning, that's 12:42 Boker, when it is day. And that day right there is or 216. They're referring to the day starting with the morning, that first light. Light from the sun also is defined as or 215. This morning or light is the primitive root, and it can include the time frame of Boker. Genesis 1:15 is where you'll first find 215. It's the first reference, and it means to be luminous. And there are 41 occurrences of or light in 215. This is your primitive root. It's going to be the verb. Properly, to make luminous. And it's also used here as break of day, which of course is true. In Genesis 1:15, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. Another occurrence of 215 is found in 2 Samuel 2:32. Joab and his men went all night, and they came to Hebron at the break of day. It's 215. Of course, or light breaks the day. They're not using boker here. And never forget that the stars give or light at night. That was commissioned by Yahuwah on the first day of creation. Still continuing in part number 3, 216 or light is also defining the break of the morning with this word forenoon. Let's look up Merriam-Webster's dictionary definition for forenoon. It's a word that we don't use a lot anymore. This is the early part of the day, ending with noon, and we call that morning in English. It would be or 216. And remember, that means properly to make luminous the break of the day. Morning 216 is going to continue to forenoon as well. We find in Isaiah 58:8, then shall thy light, 216, break forth as the morning. And it continues up all the way to the high noon. Morning is defined as forenoon or light. In Nehemiah 8:3, it says, Ezra read therein before the street that was before the water gate from the morning. That word morning there is boker, 1242. So this is from the water gate. He's reading to them in the morning. And then it continues on, and it says that he read until midday before the men and the women. This is the forenoon. And that's going to bring us into section 4, where morning is now going to end at high noon. And that is when the sun passes the meridian. We call that PM, passes the meridian, and then the afternoon follows.
Oh, well, we have some homework for you. Take a look at Mishkar. There's one occurrence. It's H4891. It means the womb of the morning. Shakah, one occurrence. That's H7904, to roam in the morning. And then Zephirah, that's H6843, a crown or a diadem, like mourning. And there's 3 occurrences. Why don't you see if these 3 definitions link to mourning for any of the covenant calendar studies?
So there's lots of different words for morning, and we didn't go into these 3 because why do you think? Maybe they don't really exactly fit with a calendar study. That's what I want you to look up. So this search for the different definitions of morning illustrates from dawn to sunrise has a wide variety of meanings depending on the specific activity. And English, of course, fails in comparison. So number 1 section was the morning at the first dawn light. And there's lots of Hebrew words at work here. Boker, Shakar for the dawn start, Neshef, and Arav. We talked about that last week. And the dawn twilight. There's many different words here that can relate to the morning at the first dawn light. In section 2, we have morning that happens at sunrise. In section 3, we had morning as the forenoon, and of course, morning ends at high noon. And don't forget that that sunlight, 216 or, is no longer a mixture, but it's illuminating directly. It's pure light from the sun. And then we had some of those other Hebrew words like Allah, where the day breaketh, and that's with the sunrise, or Zarak, with the sun rose. 2 other words that you will see once in a while. So what is the reason for this exercise? We have learned that twilight, neshef, and that's a verb, is a mixing of light and darkness. Morning, specifically the twilight time, as a noun, has a beginning, it has a middle, and it has an ending. So twilight can be used as a noun as well. for the time frame from Boker to sunrise. So twilight can be used as a verb, a mixing of light and darkness, or it can be used as a noun, which is the time frame. So Boker breaks the new day. Boker is a well-known term for the very beginning of every single cycle. Neshef, or the twilight, it then continues. Shakar, or Neshef, this is also the time frame of Shakar, it follows as the twilight time frame up to the sunrise. And then we have sunrise, that ends the twilight. From the breaking of the day up until the sunrise is the time that was set aside for the daily morning sacrifices. Remember, in the Josiah study, there's going to be a lot of sacrifices in the morning. But in this study, we have been using the term Boker, and we will continue with using the term Boker, knowing that Shakar also qualifies due to the fact that they would be offering sacrifices in that time frame. But we'll stay with the word Boker. Next, there's going to be a really important note, and then we're going to have a review of part 2 before we get started with the rest of Josiah.
So take a look at these notes for Josiah's testimony in this study. The first one is that not one of the words or Hebrew numbers for morning appears anywhere in 2 Kings 22 to 23, or even neither in 2 Chronicles 34 through 35. And this testimony of the grandest Passover ever celebrated before the Babylonian exile does not have the bundle of new moons, feasts, festivals, and Shabbats anywhere. The third point is that it appears that Yahuwah's hand was over this particular testimony for several very good reasons. This incredible witness cannot be linked to the new moon, to lunar festivals, nor to the sunset day start. And a question? So where does King Josiah have Torah permission to begin the Passover day sacrifices in the dawn of morning? So next we're going to be reviewing from our part 2 of the Josiah study. So let's get started. If you have not seen part 1, we'd ask you stop and go back. Part 1, we gave a foundation explanation for this term, Bein Ha'arbeim. And the basic meaning of this Hebrew phrase is between the mixings or twilights. In part 2, we explained the special privileges King Yoshiyahu would follow or could follow due to the Deuteronomy 16:6 prophecy of Moses. So let's have a little bit of review now for part 2. And a reminder from 2 Kings 22:2 that that's King Yoshiyahu, did what was right in the eyes of Yahuwah and did not turn aside right or left. And in 2 Chronicles 34:2, it tells us that he was very diligent in every detail of Moshe. According to Torah, King Yoshiyahu knew the Passover was not to be carried over onto the next festival, just as the scriptures reveal. Passover is on Abib 14, and unleavened bread, that is on Abib 15. And King Yoshiyahu was faithful to that. We learned King Yoshiyahu commanded the sacrificing of Passover animals in Jerusalem well into the twilight time and up until the night of Abib 14. Therefore, King Yoshiyahu was working on a dawn-to-dawn principle for the day start. Here's a question. Was King Yoshiyahu bound by any Torah laws to offer all 41,400 animal sacrifices between the twilight, beginning with sunset of Abib 14, up into the night? Or was there another Torah possibility available? Like Deuteronomy 16:6? Continuing with our review here on a dawn to dawn chart, where is Yoshiyahu's Torah permission for offering the Passover animals in Jerusalem? It states that Yoshiyahu's permission is found in Deuteronomy 16. It states to slaughter the Passover in the evening. Notice the evening on the chart, the Arab, the mixing at Areb, right here after sunset. This Arab twilight in Jerusalem lasts about 75 minutes around Passover time. And the question is that enough time right there in that space to sacrifice 41,400 animals on Abib 14? And where do the following instructions of Deuteronomy 16:6 belong when it states, at the going down of the sun, and at the appointed time you came out of Mitzrayim? Has Moshe made adequate provisions years in advance? Now we have a big alert here on this chart. Before we go any further, this is a sunset day start chart. Notice the Sabbath day start there after sunset. Deuteronomy 16:6 is a verse often used by sunset day start believers to prove the Shabbat begins at sunset. It goes something like this when they read the instructions in the evening at the going down of the sun. And most believe that this verse is talking about a sunset Sabbath, as that is what many are taught. But here's the key. Despite the fact that the context of Passover sacrifices is completely dismissed, and the last part of the verse is completely ignored. And I would state that this is a huge violation of not only the context, but of full Torah instructions. So the question is, what is the true meaning of this very important verse? When we read that there are instructions in Genesis 1:5 that state, and there came to be evening, and there came to be morning one day. Most believe that this verse is talking about each new day beginning with evening. And then many will use Deuteronomy 16:6 as a confirmation for each new day to begin in the evening, after the sun goes down, in the evening, at the going down of the sun. But do they ever quote the whole verse with verse 5 to confirm day start context? Let's read it. Deuteronomy 16:5 and 6. You are not allowed to slaughter the Pesach. Now, the context here is the slaughtering of the sacrifice. You are not allowed to slaughter the Pesach within any of your gates, which Yahuwah, your Elohim, gives you. Context is location now. But at the place where Yahuwah, your Elohim, chooses to make his name dwell, there you slaughter the Pesach. And now the context is stating when. In the evening, at the going down of the sun, at the appointed time you came out of Mitzrayim. Does Yoshiyahu understand the right ruling of Deuteronomy 16:6?
Yes, that's what we want to know. And as we finish our review for part 2, Yoshiashu's sacrifices were offered according to the right ruling of Deuteronomy 16:6 in all the categories that gave permission for Passover sacrifices. Yoshiyahu demonstrates the sacrificial times. He doesn't demonstrate day start at all, and this is how he does it. The sacrifices can be given in the Arav evening, right here, this twilight right after the sunset. Or the sacrifices could be also given at the going down of the sun. This would start from noon all the way to sunset, This is where the sun begins to go down. It goes past the meridian. This phrase, going down of the sun, is not the same as sunset. They are two different things. Or the sacrifices could be at the time when they left Mitzrayim, and that was at Boker. If you look up Numbers 33:3, you will find that they left Egypt in the Boker on the 15th of the month. Sacrificing through the night season? There was no breaking of Yahuwah's command there on Abib 14, because after the sun had set, it was still Abib 14.
So we see that Torah granted Yoshiyahu a Reb evening sacrifices for the Passover until the night. 2 Chronicles 35:14. And afterward they made ready for themselves and for the priests, because the priests, the sons of Aaron, were busied in offering of burnt offerings and the fat until night. Therefore the Levites prepared for themselves and for the priests, the sons of Aaron. Praise Yahuwah, right there, twilight sacrificing up until the night.
And we're coming up to the end of our reviewing for part 2 because we discovered something wonderful, absolutely wonderful. All 3 options for the Passover sacrifices are between the mixings, and they are supported by Deuteronomy 16:6. This between the mixing is our Ben Ha-Arbam right here. So anytime from the Boker, or the sunrise right here, this is between the mixings up to sunset. This is our between period. And we went through all of this in part 2. Even the Passover sacrifices that went up until the night, they qualify for between the mixings. This area here in the night season is still between the mixings, or Ben Ha-Arbam. Yoshiyahu did understand Passover sacrifices were permitted in the dawn twilight, so he was allowed to sacrifice there as well. And definitely the daily sacrifices were always in the Boker. In part 3, we are going to discover how King Yoshiyahu followed all the required ordinances of Moshe according to the proper order of first place, which is Rishon, and second place, Shani, in relation to 2 different areas. First of all, we're going to look at day start in the morning, or day start in the evening. Where is the day start? Where is first place? Is it morning or is it evening? That's the first section that we're going to look at. We're also going to look at the daily sacrifices. Where did the daily sacrifices? Was it the morning or the evening that have first place Rishon or second place Shani? Which daily sacrifices, the evening or the morning ones, qualify for first place and second place? But the other question is, what does this have to do with Ben Ha-Arbam and the sunset theory? Well, it's time for some new information. And what is this difference between first, number 1, and Rishon? How is this different from second, number 2, and Shani? Why are these definitions so important for this study? And what does this have to do with Passover sacrifices, primitive roots, and day start? We're going to be looking at a lot of different categories. Now, we just want to leave a note here about first and number 1 and Rishon. These terms right here are not to be confused with echad, which is defined as 1. It's number 259. And you'll see that on the first cycle of creation, it says 1. 1 cycle, 1 day, 1 yom. 1, echad. It's a numeral from 258. Properly, this is what it means. unite it, or to unify. Something that has a bundle of more than one that is concluded into that bundle. This ehad is very, very different than Rishon. Just wanted to point that out. We're not going to do any more work on that word one, but do look it up. There is a lot of different things to, you'll discover a lot by looking up that word. Okay, first place. Second place. Why? Does it matter? Do we have to look at all of these kinds of things? And just a note, there is some foundational groundwork that needs to be set up to satisfactorily understand why the terms first place and second place are so important in this study. We're going to give two examples, like I said. First, we're going to be looking at daily sacrifices, and we'll be looking at morning and evening. Those are the two examples that we're going to be looking at. Daily sacrifices for morning or evening. Which one gets first place? And we will be using these Strong's numberings for a Rav and a Rev. And if you remember, there was different numbers. 6148 is the first primitive root. It was a Rav. 6150 is another primitive root. It is also the same spelling, a Rav. And then there's 6153, a Rev. Okay, you might remember that from part 2. First place or second place for the sacrifices? Note, first and second places for sacrificial time as commanded in Numbers 28:4. Let's look and see what it says. It says, the one lamb shalt thou offer when? In the morning. Boker, 12:42. And the other lamb shalt thou offer at even. Erev, 6153. This is very important verse. So question number 1, if Torah designates the morning sacrifices are in first place for that day, can anyone change that order? I'm going to ask it again. If Torah designates that the morning sacrifices are in first place for that day, can anyone change the order? Because it is listed first. Morning is listed first. So, number 1, daily sacrifices. Morning or evening, where do they go? And question number 2, when sunset begins the day, which sacrifice is designated to the first position? Which one? Morning or evening? And does it matter? We're still looking at this first place and second place, but now we're going to be looking at the Strong's numbering system because it was done by man. The first, second, and third places for primitive roots or the regular numbering system that was devised by man, we want to find out, did man make a mistake in his numbering system? Does he have them in the right order? We know that he has 6153 Erev, which is dusk, and we know that it tells us that it has 2 primitive roots, and they're both listed as a Rav. We've seen this chart before. So here's 6153. This is the word evening in Genesis 1:5, Erev, and you look it up, it has 2 primitive roots right here, 2 of them. So question number 1 for 6148. As an Arav mixing, this primitive root is in first place in the number placement. It comes first. Did man get it right? Is that correct or not? Is that where it's supposed to be? And question number 2 is for 6150, also spelled exactly the same. As Arav mixing, this particular primitive root is designated to the second position. Is that correct? And does it matter? If a mistake was made, here is the question: can or will Torah make the correction? And how will Torah do it? And does it matter? Well, let's look at some definitions for first and for second, according to sacrifices. Let's look at the sacrifices first. First, if you look it up, 7223 is the number. It says Rishon, and it's from 7221. It means first in place, first in time or rank. Can be an adjective or a noun. 7221, Rishah. It's from the same as 7218, a beginning. First. And 7218, Rosh, from an unused root, apparently meaning to shake the head, whether literal or figurative, in many applications of place and time. And remember, we have Rosh Chodesh coming up, the first day of the next month. First, in the beginning, the first of the next month. That is Rosh Chodesh. So the first place sacrifices are going to be called Rishon. I'm going to list them here as with the morning, because the question is, didn't Numbers 28:4 list morning sacrifices first? Might be a very important verse. Well, let's look up the word second. 81:45, Shani. It's from 81:38. Properly to double. It's second. Again, it's another. It's a second time. Something that is duplicating. Going back to Shanae, when the year duplicates. And there we go. 8138, Shanae. It's a primitive root. To fold, to duplicate, to do again. Something that is double. Repeating, to do a second time. Oh, are the second place sacrifices in the evening Shani? And another question. Didn't Numbers 28:4 list evening sacrifices second in the verse? Did Moses get it right? Well, now let's chart the dawn day sacrifices in first place and second place, according to day start. And our Torah instructions are going to say from Numbers 28:4, the one lamb shalt thou offer, I'm saying first, in the morning. This is Boker. This is in the twilight time. We have our chart here. Just back it up again. This is on a dawn day chart where the day starts with our twilight. We have our day season. Then we have our dusk and the night season. And this bar here would be the ending of the first day. Let's chart Numbers 28:4. The morning sacrifices would be right here in this twilight. They are first place according to Numbers 28:4. They are in the Rishon position. We get a check mark for that. And then it says, and the other lamb shalt thou offer second at even. This is a rev. So what do we have here? In second place, yes, in the twilight time after the sunset, we have the evening sacrifices. They're in second place on a dawn day chart. Shani. We have a check mark there. Everything is good. So the dawn day start, it allows for the sacrifices to be in the correct order, as the first one is for Boker, and the second sacrifice is during the Erev. And it's all within one 24-hour cycle. And don't forget that this day season right here is considered between these two mixtures, Ben Ha Arabeim, just as the night season would also be. Well, you've seen the dawn day chart. Let's now chart these sacrifices according to a sunset day chart. Our Torah instructions, we're going to leave them at the top from Numbers 28:4, and we're going to do two different sunset charts. We know that in sunset theory, the Erev follows the sunset, and then the first season that they have is the night season, and the second season is the day season until the sunset changes the day, right there to the second night season. And there's going to be two sunset charts. Let's see if one of them is right. Right here, the very first sacrifice, excuse me, that is offered would be this one right here after the sunset. An evening sacrifice. Second, does it have the second place? Is it Shani? No, it isn't. It's wrong. It is actually in first place. But Numbers 28:4 is telling us that the even is actually in second place. And then we have the morning sacrifice comes at the end of the night season. And now morning sacrifices are no longer in the first place. They're no longer Rishon. It's not correct, is it? Sunset chart number 1 cannot align with Numbers 28:4 because it placed the evening sacrifices for the cycle in the first place, and then the morning sacrifices are in the second place. It's not hard to see that. So why don't we look at sunset chart number 2, because maybe it has the solution to come into alignment with Numbers 28:4. So sunset chart number 2 solution. We'll just move the sacrifices. Nothing else has changed. And what did they do? They moved the sacrifices. Can you see where the placement is? During the day season, not in the twilights. When the sacrifices were moved to the 3rd and the 9th hours during the day season, look what happens. We now have the correct order for Rishon and Shani. The morning sacrifice is in the first position, and the second sacrifice is in the Shani position. Isn't that handy? Now they're in the right positions on a sunset day chart. But the sacrifices are no longer placed at Boker and Erev. So sunset theory does not and it cannot comply with Numbers 28. They tried to make it work. They changed them. That was the only thing they could do.
So what have we learned so far? Well, about sacrifices, we've learned the morning sacrifices are listed as the first sacrifices to be done for each day, and this is the Rishon application. And for day start, only the Boker morning component begins each new day, and this is the Rishon application. So next, we need to learn about primitive roots. Will the 2 assigned Hebrew numbers issued by man for the 2 primitive roots of Arab, that is Arab and Arab, will they follow the patterns that we have seen for sacrifices and day start? Between H6150 and H6148, which one will have the Rishon application? And we're going to have to take a look at some sunset charts again for this information.
But those charts aren't coming for a while.
Yeah.
So Aref 6153, don't forget it has 2 primitive roots. And the question is why? And does it matter? Note, the numbering system given to Hebrew words was designed by man. Do not forget that. In general, the primitive roots serve to define the verb action function of a Hebrew noun. We talked about that earlier. And an example is both dusk Erev and dawn Boker are nouns or mixtures. The primitive roots for both mixtures is the verb arav, mixings. Okay, the primitive root for Erev and for Boker, or for both of the ravs, okay, we talked about that last time in part 2, are mixings. And we see that there are 2 primitive roots for mixings. Why do we need 2? Wouldn't 1 be enough? For the word arav, man made a decision for arav boker primitive root to have first place. First place, 6148, is arav. It's a mixing. And you can go look at it. It's not going to say anything there about morning. It's going to say general mixing of anything, whether it's animals, different peoples, insects, braiding of hair. It doesn't matter. It's a mixing, a general mixing. When we're talking about calendar, that mixing is going to be Boker. Why? Why is that the right decision? Because the second primitive root, which is 6150, and it's also a Rav, it is specific to the mixing after sunset, duskiness after sunset. According to the Torah, will a Rav Boker, we're looking at that 6148, a Rav Boker qualify for first place for Torah covenant day start? Or will the sunset demand that Erev, which is 6150, holds the first place? Now, man said that 6148 is in first place. 6150 is in second place. Are we going to find that in Covenant Torah day start?
And what will happen if Yoshiyahu attempts to observe Passover according to sunset theory, like Josephus and the leaders were doing about 700 years later? Remember, that would mean that Bein Ha'arbeim would take on the different spelling and meaning. It would be written as Bein Ha'erbeim. And interesting enough, Erbaim is not a scriptural word because there are not two Areb dusks in one cycle. Can the concept of sunset theory justify itself through the 41,400 Passover sacrifices if they were offered by Yoshiyahu according to sunset theory? Now, this would be a good time to remember these 4 question slides from part 2, Before the Sunset Charts. And literally, it's a review in showing that it is not possible to have 2 Areb dusk mixings in one 24-hour cycle. And what is our next challenge? We're going to be plotting some sunsets charts. Will a chart that begins the cycle with sunset, will it be able to demonstrate Bein Ha'arbaim when the new cycle begins with either Areb Arab in first place or Boker Arab in second place? Will the sunset day start allow for the daily sacrifices of numbers 28:4 to remain at Boker day start? So watch carefully as the sunset charts can be very challenging. Yes, they can. Here is chart number 1 of 7. And what does a sunset chart expose using the verb Arab for all the twilight mixings? So notice we have the Arab at Areb right there. Then we have an Arab mixing at Boker and an Arab mixing at Areb evening. Now, does this look like a Bein Ha'arbaim between 2 mixings from sunset to sunset? How about here from sunset to dawn between these Arab mixtures? Does this look like a Bein Ha'arbaim? Or between dawn and sunset at this day season? Does this look like a Bein Ha'arbaim? Sunset theory appears to align with Bein Ha'arbaim. So what is the problem?
What do we know for sure? We know this, that all mixings are a Rav. Every one of them. And there's only 2 in every cycle. But not all mixings are only a Rev or only Boker. We need to make that distinction. So keeping things simple, the sunset charts will use the nouns erev and boker instead of arav to try to help you so that you can see what's happening at their appropriate twilight positions so that we can avoid any confusion set forth with the sunset day start. It's very, very difficult to show truth on a chart that is not correct. So let's just hang in there. So we're going to use a rev and boker, and then a rev over here would be the new day start for sunset, just so that it's a little bit easier to keep track of what's going on. You already know that they're all mixtures because sunset days begin at a rev and they end at a rev, so it's a rev to a rev. Do note there is no such phrase as Ben Har Erev, because this would be a rev to a rev. There's only one erev in every cycle. Okay, no such word as Ben Har Erev. And we need to remember that Arav Boker, the primitive root for Arav Boker, holds the first place for the day start. It's not Arav Erev. Remember, Arab is the mixing, Areb basically is the noun. It's where you're going to find this mixing. Chart number 3 out of 7. It's a sunset chart. We have a huge problem with sunset to sunset. Notice this Erev to Erev, according to the sunset theory. Is it possible for Yashayahu to offer 41,400 sacrifices Ben Har Erev? Sacrificing down here in the night season, starting with the very first Erev, if that's what you want to call it, at the sunset twilight, and to roast and eat the Passover meal that night on the same date. Remember, this is Passover, Abib 14 on a sunset. And then now we have a problem. We have to burn the remains before the morning. This is where Abib 15 would happen on a sunset chart. We have to burn the remains before the morning of Abib 15, 24 hours later. It's already going to sound confusing, but where are they going to offer all of these sacrifices during the night? You think there's something else here that we need to remember? No, Yashayahu sacrificed up to the night. He didn't sacrifice through the night of Abib 14. It says he sacrificed up to the night of Abib 14. So it's really good to pay attention to what the words say in the content of a passage. Chart number 4 of 7. Yashayahu commanded the paschal lambs to be sacrificed on Abib 14 between the mixings, the same time frame as when Yahusha was the sacrifice. So this is where he was to offer the sacrifices. But up to which night? Is it this night here, Abib 14 night? Or on a sunset chart, would this be the Abib 14 night over here? You can already see that there is a problem. On a sunset day start, Passover sacrifices can be offered during Erev dusk. The people can eat of the Passover sacrifice on Abib 14 night season. That would be here on a sunset chart. But how are they to obey the stipulation that the remains of the sacrifice must be burned to be removed out of sight on this night, and it has to be before the arrival of Abib 15 day season that is to follow on the next morrow? But look what happens that follows after a Passover night on a sunset chart. We have Abib's light season, Abib 14 light season. Way off the chart, you're going to find Abib 15 light season. Do you see a problem here? This Erev absolutely does not qualify for sacrifices in first place. It cannot. And what are the people doing on this Abib 14 light season? If they've sacrificed everything over here, what are the people doing on a sunset light season over here when the day follows the night season? And right here, the first placement of the Shani evening sacrifices, it disqualifies the sunset day start, starting with dusk Erev. Do you remember why? Do you see huge sunset problems in every area of this chart? You know, the Torah statutes of Ben Ha-RBM cannot align with sunset theory. You cannot make it work. Chart 5 of 7. This is a challenging chart, and we're going to use the dawn day. Notice that we have sunset here. The dawn started over here before this, and here's Abib 14 Passover night. This is correctly an Erev twilight. And then the dawn comes along and we have Abib 15 light season. So this is a dawn day chart. Okay, let's take a look. Only the original Mitzrayim Passover, only Egypt's Passover, could align slightly with what theory? With a sunset theory? Really? Let's take a look. The command to slay, roast, and eat on the Abib 14 night and burn the remains before the Abib 15 morning, which is Boker right here, is possible when slaying only one Passover lamb. And that's what they did. Each home slew their own lamb, just one. Yes, they can do it. But what about Yoshiyahu? What happened there? Well, we just had to do the math. We found that 41,400 slayings at night, and that would be at least 4,140 per hour, and we're thinking about safety issues. Did Yahuwah ever demand or command them to offer that many sacrifices at night? Chart number 6. Wait, is there a command to sacrifice during the full Abib 14 night season anywhere in the scriptures? We talked about that on the last slide. Over 41,000 slayings at night, all night long. Do you see a problem here? Let's finish on our last chart. Yoshiyahu has brilliantly revealed the sunset to sunset impossibility. His account reveals with absolute certainty the impossibility of sunset theory. And what do we say? Oh, the importance of Yoshiyahu's testimony. It is probably the most profound testimony we have in the Old Testament. So away it goes. Away goes the things that do not apply to the dawn day start. We'll just get rid of them because they don't work. And in case you're wondering, Josephus and the leaders would have had the same issue. They would have had the same problem, but nobody talks about it.
Now we can make some final conclusions for Strong's number system. Remember first, second, and third places for primitive roots and or the regular numbering system. It was devised by man and listed as H6153 Areb Dusk, and it had two primitive roots, both listed as Arab. So we see Arab 6148 listed first. And our answer for number 1, H6148, is a verb as an Arab mixing. This primitive root is correctly listed for first place in the number placement system. And then we see 6150, Arab, also a verb. As Arab mixing, this primitive or primary root is correctly designated to be the second position, and it does matter. And finally, 6153 a rev, a noun, and Torah did not have to make any corrections, as Strong's has it right.
That's good news.
It is documented that Yoshiyahu was a righteous man who did not deviate to the right nor to the left of the Torah. Yoshiyahu made a covenant with Yahuwah to keep the Passover by the Torah standard. And again, it is recorded that Yoshiyahu commanded the priests to sacrifice the animals that were specified for Abib 14 Passover only up until the night season. That means past the sunset, up until the night season. And thoughts we need to carefully ponder. Number one, it has been possible to reckon Yoshiyahu's actions with Torah statutes. Yes, indeed. And Yoshiyahu, he did live up to the standard recorded of him in the scriptures. There is a specific reason why this testimony was preserved in the Tanakh. Yahuwah wants us to pay attention to a very unusual situation just a few years before Judah is marched off to Babylon, along with forgetting Passover instructions in the next 70 years. And sadly, this Passover Torah truth was never restored until Yahusha's witness. And considering all things, Yahuwah absolutely preserved this extremely clear witness that the sunset does not, never did, change the cycle of the week in his kingdom. So here's a summary and a review for right ruling. Number one, the Passover portions for the priests were eaten according to statute requirements. That was after dusk on Abib 14. Number two, the final sacrifices designated for Abib 14, they were all completed after the sunset up until the night, say nautical dusk, which was still Passover Abib 14. Number three, the Passover meal was eaten during the night season on Abib 14, and that is according to the Torah. And number four, any Passover lamb leftovers were burned before the night season of Abib 14 ended, and that also is according to Torah. So all these points are according to the Torah. There is no deviation whatsoever. And yes, again, we can see that dawn design, it delivers perfect scriptural alignment. And I say hallelujah. Clearly, dawn commences Yahuwah's Shabbats, dawn commences the feasts, dawn commences the festivals, all of them. There are no exceptions. And we can now answer the questions from the beginning of this study of what is first and second place of sacrifices and specific timing? And what about first and second place of Arab primitive roots? For sacrifices, the Boker daily sacrifices are always in first place, that is Rishon, and this aligns with dawn day start. The Arab daily sacrifices are always in second place, that is Shani. Arab sacrifices never affirm that sunset or Arab changes the cycle to the next day. And with primitive roots, every cycle has two Arbaim, two twilights. One is first place and the other is second place. H6148 Arab is the first primitive root applied to only Boker mixing as Rishon, and that aligns with dawn day start. And H6150, that word number is the second primitive root, and it applies to Arab mixing as Shani. It is the duplicate of the boker. It does not align with sunset. More review for right ruling. First and second place of boker morning and a reb evening. Day start, we've seen sunset does not and it cannot align with Bein Ha'arbeim because the new cycle begins with the first place Boker Arab and not the second place Areb Arab. The sunset day start cannot align the first place sacrifices at Boker day start with Numbers 28:4. And what about right ruling with King Yoshiyahu? Well, sunset did not change Abib 14 to Abib 15 in the account of Yoshiyahu sacrificing all the 41,400 offerings within one 24-hour cycle of Bein Ha'arbaim. Yoshiyahu, it is the only Old Testament testimony of about 20 that has not been tampered with to include that bundle of new moons, festivals, and Shabbats for this particular festival. There are no idle words in Scripture. Are you beginning to see why these simple Scripture testimonies are so very important? Yoshiyahu delivers to us one more ultra important point. Did you notice in this study that every part of the 24-hour period has been commissioned with a specifically designated event, except one? Which one and why?
And so as we end this study today, let's just look at this. Did Yahuwah reserve the boker for a purpose? A Rav down here? First place, Rishon. Have we overlooked the morning twilight mixture, the Arav mixture of the boker? Why has it thus far been untouched? Do the scriptures reserve Shakar for a special purpose? Remember, we have Boker 1242 as dawn, the very break of day, but Shakar can also be to dawn, but to be up early at a task. Is Shakar reserved here for something special? Let's look at a couple scriptures. Psalm 63:1 says, "Early will I seek thee." Psalm 78:34, they returned and inquired early after Elohim. Proverbs 7:15, diligently to seek thy face, and I have found thee. Proverbs 8:17, those that seek me early shall find me. Isaiah 26:9, with my spirit within me will I seek thee early. Hosea 5:15, in their affliction they will seek thee early. And there's many, many more scriptures. Seeking Yahuwah early identifies with a task at Shakar. A Boker Arav purpose? Absolutely, there is a purpose. Because Yahuwah reserved the Boker Arav, this dawn mixture, specifically for the daily sacrifice and nothing else. But he wants to impress upon us the importance of our daily living sacrifice, our spiritual breakfast to nourish our cycles, because we don't offer sacrifices anymore. Would that qualify for the Shakar understanding? Think about that.
Does the following of the Torah interest you? Will you now consider the evidence put forth from the scriptures in this study? Will you consider the evidence from the other 40 plus studies in this series of dawn design? And what about the untapped dawn day start witnesses in the Gospels alone? Will you consider putting away the sunset traditions received from our fathers? And if so, just ask for the studies. This is the end of our study. And there are many, many new concepts that were presented in this full study of Yoshiyahu. May Yahuwah assist your desire to understand, and your decision to process all the information, keeping first things first. Please send your questions and/or your responses to questions@studythecalendar.com. We thank you for joining us, and we say shalom.